I want to bring in Tom Mulcair now. He's CTV's political commentator and the former leader of the NDP. Tom, good morning to you.
Good to be with you, Marcia.
You've had some time to really think about the Prime Minister's testimony yesterday afternoon. Your reaction, let's begin there.
Well, I followed it closely because it was important. It's not every day that you see this, but now it's the second time we've seen Trudeau before a commission of inquiry. Once was on the Emergencies Act, and everybody, including me, said he did very well. I think he did well yesterday, but I think that there are some glaring problems with his testimony, and especially with that of Dominic LeBlanc. So let's go to that right away. And I think that you, in the setup to this, you hit on the main thing, and the clip that they used of Trudeau was one of the most important ones. So he's saying that he didn't have sufficiently clear information to act even on a single candidate. That was an attempt to dovetail with Dominic LeBlanc's testimony, but in French, LeBlanc, in the first part of his testimony, said he couldn't remember if CSIS had talked to him specifically about a riding. Now, that's a bit surprising from a seasoned lawyer like LeBlanc, who was trained at one of the top U.S. universities and went to law school there for his master's. And he can't remember, even though he was the minister of democratic institutions. That's surprising. Let's leave it at that. Then there's the bit about Trudeau saying, well, I didn't have enough credible information. So he kept taking this side shot at CSIS, at the quality and quantity of their information, at its credibility. And at the same, while he was throwing CSIS under the bus, he was trying to let himself off the hook. But here's the deal. If he didn't have credible enough information until everything had appeared in the papers, how was it? And he touched on it intentionally without being asked, so they know that it's a weak spot. He was trying to cover it up. He was clear enough in his mind and in the briefings, and he went through long explanations about how you have to make sure that the information is rock solid. He goes up to the president of China in November 2022 on the sidelines of the G20 meeting in Bali, Indonesia, and his staff brags, and Trudeau doesn't deny, that he had been giving him what for Chinese government interference in Canadian elections. Now, he soft-pedaled that yesterday. It was, well, I talked to him about interference in our democratic processes. He tried to downplay it a bit, but you can't have it both ways. You can't say that you didn't have credible information and then say that you had enough credible information to go and talk and give heck to the leader of one of the most important countries in the world, one of the most powerful men in the world. It doesn't wash. So I do think that that's a weakness. Is the commission going to be able to do anything with it? I'm not convinced. I do think that largely Mr. Trudeau was just allowed to skate through and to give his prepared stuff. The commissioner herself did come in a couple of times on specific issues. Generally, the council there seemed to be adhering to a script, not taking advantage of some of the openings that were offered. So overall, I think this is going to be a wash. If anybody thought that there was going to be a smoking gun here to prove that Trudeau knew that there was interference but didn't do anything because it was to the advantage of the Liberals and it was going to hurt the Conservatives, I think they're going to be disappointed. I don't think that any such smoking gun has been found.
Okay, I hear you. I am wondering, though, Tom, what is the takeaway from all of this for Canadians? Should they feel confident in national security? As you say, CSIS got thrown under the bus. Should they feel good about the next election campaign? What are your thoughts around that?
The next election campaign, and I would dare say the one before. In other words, we're looking at 2019, 2021. I had information that I was given after that election with regard to Russian interference in the 2015 campaign that I was involved in. That didn't come from government sources, by the way. It came from outside sources. So it's interesting to note that this has been around for a while. We've seen this in the past. We do know that diaspora groups are sometimes influenced amongst themselves on behalf of the home country, so to speak. Look, the only MP ever assassinated in Canadian history was Thomas D'Arcy McGee, and he was assassinated because the diaspora community, and especially from the States known as the Fenians, thought he should be involved in the fight for Ireland from Canada. And he said, no, that's something we're going to leave there. And that cost him his life. And so this is not new. And Canada is a country built on immigration. We've always had large diaspora communities. And we've got to understand that in the new age that we're living in, some of those communities are especially vulnerable, given social media, given state-controlled media, given media that's been bought and controlled by their home governments. In the case of the Chinese Communist Party, they have interests in media here in Canada. Not only their access to social media that they're beaming into the homes of many of their diaspora communities. So we've got to figure that out. But I think that the Canadian voting public will come away from this somewhat dissatisfied, because there's a lot that's still taped over. I mean, a lot of the information has been redacted. Mr. Trudeau tried every trick in the book, and he seems to have succeeded with the last efforts. He did everything that he could to keep a lid on this thing. He gave it to 3 senior bureaucrats who all worked for him. He gave it to be revised by somebody who worked for him in the past and had been the head of the Trudeau Foundation, for heaven's sakes. So that when all that didn't wash with the Canadian public, he handed it off to David Johnston, a respected guy. But it turned out he had far more connections to Trudeau than people seem to know about, and he had to step down. So we've got a commission. I think that Madam Justice Hogue is doing this quite well. She seems to have done a good job of separating out what she could make public and what she can't. She showed from her questions yesterday she had some serious, question marks around some of the things she was being told. Is it going to be more than the standard, oh, well, we've got to be more careful, we've got to have better links between the political staff and the intelligence community like CSIS? It might boil down to something as banal as that. I don't see that there's been enough so far for them to go much further.
Tom Mulcair for us this morning. Tom, as always, great to chat with you. Tom is our CTV News political commentator and the former leader of the NDP.